Wake up, grab a pastry. Noon hits, grab a sandwich. Sun sets, plate up dinner. We treat this daily rhythm like a law of nature, something programmed directly into our biology. But for the vast majority of human history, our ancestors were nomadic. They ate sporadically, relying entirely on the unpredictable success of a hunt or a foraging trip. There was no internal timer telling them they needed a midday snack. Evidence from 30,000 years ago shows hunter-gatherers gathering around hearths to cook and share food. Anthropologists call this commensality, the practice of eating together. It was a deeply social ritual, driven by the availability of food, never the hands of a clock. Human biological hunger doesn't come with a stopwatch. The rigid schedule we take for granted today wasn't inherited from our nomadic ancestors. It was built, piece by piece, over the last few centuries. To see this biological flexibility in action, look at Aboriginal Australian traditions. Indigenous groups utilized earth ovens, slow cooking with hot coals and rocks, to prepare a single daily meal, supplemented with casual foraging throughout the day. Across the globe, the ancient Romans built one of history's largest empires on a remarkably different schedule. They prioritized a single main meal, called cena, consumed around noon, followed by a light refreshment right before bed. If mighty empires and enduring cultures thrived for centuries on a single daily meal, the three-meal structure is a historical development rather than a baseline biological requirement. The shift toward a scheduled diet began during the Middle Ages, driven by ideological forces rather than nutritional needs. Deeply held Christian traditions across Europe strictly forbade consuming any food before attending morning mass. Once those religious duties were fulfilled, believers were finally allowed to literally break their fast. Fulfilling this religious adherence created the very first formally scheduled morning meal. By the 16th century, this budding structure found a powerful military catalyst, the British Royal Navy. Managing thousands of sailors out at sea required intense discipline. The Navy implemented a rigid schedule of 3 meals a day, a simple morning ship's biscuit, a heavy midday meal, and a light supper, to align with shipboard duties and keep the crew orderly. Natural appetite was actively overridden. Religious doctrine and military discipline forced digestion into a strict timetable, laying the groundwork for the modern schedule. The global tipping point arrived with the Industrial Revolution. As populations moved from farms to cities, labor was organized into rigid, standardized workdays. Concurrently, artificial lighting became cheap and reliable. People no longer had to stop working or managing their households the moment the sun went down. Because families could keep their homes lit, the heavy main meal of the day drifted away from noon and was pushed into the late evening after the long factory shift finally ended. This timeline compares a typical rigid factory shift to natural daylight, showing a massive 12-hour caloric gap right in the middle of the day. Factory workers were enduring extended hours of grueling physical labor with absolutely nothing to sustain them. By the 1850s, a solution was formalized. The concept of lunch emerged as a specific, scheduled midday refuel to sustain that heavy physical output until the evening whistle blew. Commercial interests locked the final piece into place. In the early 20th century, men like John Harvey Kellogg aggressively marketed breakfast as the most important meal of the day, simply to sell toasted cornflakes. The holy trinity of meals was finalized to synchronize with factory whistles and expand consumer markets. Our daily eating routine is a legacy of industrial productivity prioritized over any specific biological need. Throughout the 20th century, the 9-to-5 workday cemented this pattern, solidifying the modern family dining routine into an expected daily law. Our bodies adapted to this routine through what biologists call the metabolic clock. Over generations, we trained our digestive systems to anticipate food at these specific, recurring times. Knowingly, when your stomach growls at exactly noon, it feels like an urgent biological need. In reality, it is a conditioned physiological response to centuries of corporate history. Today, that rigid 19th century schedule is finally breaking down. The gig economy, remote work, and shifting post-pandemic lifestyles have fractured the traditional 9-to-5 workday. You no longer have to plan your day around access to a kitchen. Rapid food delivery apps mean a meal is only ever a few minutes away, dissolving the necessity of strict pre-planned mealtimes. We are embracing fluid social eating habits, connecting over food through late brunches and afternoon teas. Our schedules are proving to be entirely adaptable. Human biology is incredibly flexible. By eating when you are actually hungry rather than watching the clock, you aren't breaking a biological law. You are simply stepping out of a historical routine.